Well, the whole house is set up as a procession through spaces, indoor and outdoors. You actually arrive into a central courtyard, and then you arrive into this sort of interstitial space, which is a sky court with this large oculus that is inspired by the Pantheon, as well as James Turrell. And the idea is to sort of create this intermediary space that brings you from outdoors to indoors. And there's a fountain here that gives you this great reflection of light, and this really becomes an outdoor room, your first experience of the house. The materials are materials that we find in Miami. We like to think they're sort of organic in nature, in that they are from the land. We have here keystone, which is oolitic limestone, which basically is coral rock, which forms the foundations of much of the land in Miami. And there's a great amount of fossils and other sea life that's embedded within the stone. There's also the use of wood, which is a cypress, which is a Florida native of tree, and it's used because it holds up to the climate here in Florida, as well as the use of metal, which is inspired by some of the decorative wrought iron work that you find in some of the houses. So what we're trying to do is create a timelessness and use materials that are sincere and of the place that we're building, but also using techniques in sort of more modern ways that begin to transcend, is it modern, is it Mediterranean revival, is it classical, and really come up with something that is designed from a sensory perspective in terms of how it feels, looks, smells, sounds, beyond just stylistic intention. Well, the idea behind this is that you would be able to enclose this and actually make it a bit of a room. Also, the idea of this sort of diaphanous veil that would allow this kind of beautiful filtered light to kind of penetrate into this space. And it has some kind of fun applications as well. For Halloween, we've sometimes projected horror movies from the back, so that you get this 22-foot high creatures coming. So when trick-or-treaters come in, they get a quite of a scare. It's also inspired a little bit by the Delano Hotel on Miami Beach that Philippe Starck did, one of his, I think, greatest works. It's also where I met my wife, so it's sort of a little homage to the Delano as well. So we wanted to create this great volume that had really amazing proportion. I think my time living in Rome and studying in Rome definitely added to the understanding of these spaces and the way that you can create a tremendous amount of drama with very simple volumes. This column here, the most dramatic move in the rear elevation, was actually at one point a stair. And we also needed it structurally due to the thinness of the slabs, that we weren't using cast in place concrete. This is a wood structure above. So we needed some sort of column. We played around with different rhythms of columns, different sizes of columns, and then we ended up putting a stair in the column, and now we end up having this really dramatic shower. The first time we had an event in this house for a fundraiser for a museum, and when we went outside after dinner, the moon was aligning actually with the oculus of the shower. And it's funny, Zaha Hadid spends a lot of time in Miami, and she's been over quite a few times for dinner. She calls that our own private pantheon. The pool is, actually I think it's my favorite experience of anything I've ever created to date, besides my son. It's like this hole of water, very natural but yet very geometric. So it's this sort of pure, sort of mirrored surface that just floats within the garden, within the grass. There's a hot tub floating under a quarter of an inch of water, and just the way that the edges disappear, and you just have this kind of amazing surface reflecting the light and the trees, and it's just a delight to be in there. The stone is actually a Pietra Serena, which is a lava stone. The surface is diamond bright, but we went with a dark pool because we wanted to feel more engaged within the landscape. We didn't want it to feel synthetic, so it's very much looks like the sort of coloration of the canals. We wanted to create sort of a sense of arrival. Some people speak about Mars Lapidus and the Fontainebleau, where that stairway to nowhere, where people would get out on the mezzanine level, take the elevator down to the mezzanine level, and then make a sort of grand entrance down the stair. And I guess that was somewhat inspiring, but the idea was also really, I thought it would be too massive. We're sort of very practical in our decisions, but too massive to have something in this space. It would have made this space too tight. So we really, once again, just reduced this part of the stair down to its bare essence, and created this kind of rising out of the floor, these sort of planks of wood that emerge and go up into an enclosed space. So it was really more of a spatial decision, and how could we get away with something that is as open as possible, which we are constantly worried about our young child falling on this. So we've been working on some different protection techniques to resolve that issue. It's a big space, it's very pure, it's minimal and romantic, but there's, I think, a great sense of warmth. Even though there's not much furniture, there's very kind of selected and curated pieces. And then you get this kind of great expanse of this very large wall of wood and glass that opens out to the pool. I guess this space is quite awe-inspiring in terms of its proportion and scale, and yet it still is a fun space. It's a warm space, it's a comfortable space. I mean, we ride bicycles and cars inside the house. What we also tried to focus on was the idea of smaller spaces. So you have a kitchen and breakfast area that are off of this, you have a foyer. So sort of the organization of these spaces. In front of us we have a family room where there's a difference of scale and proportion. So it's really the relationship of these spaces off of this very large space that I find quite interesting and really enjoy living in these varied spaces. What we're trying to do in this house is really kind of channel all things that make Miami, and allow the house to absorb the beauty of what makes Miami so special.